Hello all, welcome back to the show, the place that helps you improve your British English whilst having chats about culture, be it British culture or other ones. And today we have the big dog himself, Luke from Luke's English podcast, back on the show to discuss his findings as he's been doing a social experiment of his own. Not sure if he was aware of it, but he has indeed been running an experiment, one that has been going on for, I'd say 10 years or so. Is that right, Luke?
Yeah, it's actually 10 years this year. September.
Wow, there we go. 10 years. So yes, his social experiment was to take himself, a man born and raised in England, and plonk himself in the capital of France and stay there for over a decade, or bang on, a decade. And at long last, he's ready to divulge his findings about the French and their culture to our listeners. So strap in, leave your egos at the door as well, because stereotypes are indeed stereotypes. And what I mean by that is they are generalizations that one does not assume of all individuals, merely they are interesting to observe and discuss in a light-hearted way. So with that preface, let's unveil the virtual or auditory curtain that has already been opened slightly and say hello to the man behind it, Mr. Thompson. Welcome back, sir.
Hello, Charlie. Thank you for having me back.
Do you feel like a big dog?
The big dog. Wow. I've never been called a big dog before, but I quite like it. It's nice to be here on the British English podcast. How are you doing?
I would say I'm fine, just to go along with it. But actually, I've got a cold. I've got a very big head cold right now. Yesterday, I had the worst of it, but it's still lingering. But yeah, I thought I would carry on. I'd try to tap into like the stoicism our older generations tried to instill in us, but failed on my part normally. Or normally. Would you feel like you've taken that on board from your grandparents? Before you begin, I'd like to let you know that we now have an official app released for the British English podcast. You can now listen to this podcast on the new app and get all of the learning resources along with it. And for those of you who are just listening on your favourite podcast app, then I've got a present for you. Download the app, sign up to the course called Free Podcast Worksheets, and you will find every single episode available for you to listen to along with the free worksheet for that episode. A huge resource right there waiting for you to enjoy. So go download it right now at your app store, either by typing in BEP, or the British English Podcast. Links are also in the show notes. Enjoy this episode.
You know, I was thinking about this the other day because I've got a daughter as well. She's 4 years old and she's in a very whingy stage, which is absolutely doing my head in. So if there's one little thing that's not just perfect, she goes into a full-on whinge and she's just whinging and moaning. And my greatest fear is that we have bring her up to be soft and entitled, no like substance, no grit.
Yeah, no grit.
Yeah, I really want her to more stoic and to be able to put up with things that she doesn't really like. So I've been thinking about that from the point of view of a parent, but also it just made me think, yeah, probably over the last 50 to 100 years that I feel like there has been a change and that people have become a bit softer and maybe a bit more self-oriented, and it's a bit disappointing. I don't know if that just means I'm becoming an old fart, that I think, oh, things aren't the way they used to be, you know, people were much stronger and everything was better back in the past. I'm trying not to be like that, but sometimes those thoughts do creep in. Try to be stoic and try not to complain too much and so on.
Yeah, fair enough. That is interesting about your daughter and trying to make her a stronger, less, maybe less entitled younger person. I want that as well. I think that's a big fear for parents. Not that I'm a parent, but when I am one day, hopefully, I would worry about raising a spoilt child.
Yeah, it infuriates me, even when there's a little hint of it, when the spoiled child comes out in her, I'm just like, I cannot stand it. I really don't want to let her become that spoilt child. It's one of my biggest fears.
When I think of it, I think I will try to deal with this like I do with other conversations with people, where I just like explain my feelings, explain what I think should happen, and hopefully that will get through to them. But I'm looking at it as in I would be talking to a rational adult, but forgetting that it's a child that you'd have to be talking to. Is there any way to get through to a child with that?
Oh, I don't know. That's the thing that at the worst moments you think this is completely fruitless. Like there's no way I can get through to her, and there's nothing I can do. And also you kind of think it's not just the parents that sort of instill values in the child, but the world around you as well, and everything, all the other kids that they mix with at school, and the stuff that they watch on like the iPad at the weekend. It all sort of like all slowly creeps in and forms who she is, and a lot of it's out of my control. So yeah, that's the worst part of it, is the fear that there's nothing you can do, and that. But then again, on the flip side, I think that generations today, or young, this is becoming more and more common, that people are more willing to talk about their feelings, and instead of just burying your feelings and never talking about them. It used to be the case that you just never talked about your feelings, and that's not healthy, And so like my grandfather's generation, he fought in the war, and he must have experienced horrific things, but he never talked about them. He just buried them completely. And we've always thought that's a pity, that he was never able to kind of sort of, I don't know, deal with the trauma that he must have experienced.
Yeah.
And that's because that's just social. That was the norm at the time. But so, swings and roundabouts, Charlie, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Swings and roundabouts. Yeah, I agree. I think the younger generation are definitely self-aware, or more self-aware than before, and feel comfortable talking about it and feel comfortable. I was at a comedy gig the other day, and the comedian started by saying, "Who's having therapy?" And about 50% of the crowd said, "Yeah, me," kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is not only unusual from what I used to think of as 50%, but also 50% were brave enough to say it.
Yeah. In fact, I've heard that these days, when people are dating, I mean, I'm far from being, in the world of dating these days, but that when people are dating, it's more attractive if someone is in therapy than someone who isn't. That going to therapy is now supposed to be this sort of normal thing to do. And that if you're not in therapy, then there's something maybe a little wrong with you, that you're not willing or able to, deal with your own problems.
Ah, yeah, okay.
So therapy is now far more socially acceptable, if not socially expected, than it used to be.
Brilliant. Fair enough.
Which is good, right? Surely this is good.
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is good. I mean, you did psychology at university, so, I mean, I suppose you believe in the value of therapy.
Well, on top of being able to read everybody's mind, yes, I believe in therapy. I remember that.
That's what you learn by studying psychology at university. It's like suddenly you're like Derren Brown. You can just read everyone's mind, implant thoughts in people's brains, control whoever's around you.
Mel Gibson, he did a perfect job of explaining my experience in What Women Want, I think. That was Mel Gibson.
Yeah, really?
Wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Mel Gibson, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's funny. Whenever I mentioned I was doing psychology, they would be like, "Oh, stop reading my mind."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, of course I can. But yeah, no, I do think it's good to talk about therapy. Quickly going back to the cold that I've got, I went to a gathering. It was an engagement party, a surprise engagement party. And the host, he's a good friend, but he had a cold. And I wonder now what people's opinion of this is. I don't know if I'm an old age pensioner by assuming this, but out of the pandemic, I'm a bit more sensitive to socializing around people with a cold. If I had a cold, I would either cancel it or change the location and not be the host. What do you think? Do you think we should just carry on and it's just a cold?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably just a cold.
So it's fine. Just,
Yeah, I think we haven't quite got to the stage yet where even if you got a cold, you've got to wear a mask and like isolate.
No.
Quarantine for 14 days. I would say I think it's probably okay. But with COVID, it's a bit of a grey area. I had it recently. So I had it, and then after about 10 days, I got a negative test. But there was still that feeling of like, should I tell people? Should I, if I'm with them? Oh, by the way, I had COVID, but I'm negative. I got a negative test yesterday, just so you know. It's difficult to know what the social etiquette is around these things now.
Definitely. And to let them know when it was. Like, you've got to say it very quickly after I had COVID or I've got...
Or just show them your vaccination certificate or let them scan your COVID pass. You know, it's very weird. It's an extremely weird time that we're living in, isn't it?
But so you would say that my friend should have done what he did. He should have carried on. It's just a cold, Charlie. If you get the cold, man up.
I think that he should have had a test to make sure it was just a cold.
I think he did. Yeah.
Yeah. And if he was negative, then just crack on.
Crack on. Okay, fair enough. I'll keep that in mind and not be such a pansy.
We can't let the cold win. We've got to just keep calm and carry on.
Yes, very true, very true. So yes, that is a stereotype of British people, to keep calm and carry on. But we're here to talk about your social experiment that you've been running for 10 years. So let's get into it. The first question I have, I'm hoping that people will take it as a bit of a joke, but do French people all wear berets and striped shirts, Luke?
You know what? Before I answer that question, I need to give a sort of disclaimer or a caveat before we kick off properly, right?
Good word as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I need to say that, first of all, I live in Paris, and Paris and France are not the same thing. And if you've got any French listeners, they will probably appreciate me saying this, especially if they don't live in Paris, because I've talked about this kind of thing quite a lot on my podcast. And I always get people writing in saying, you're talking about Paris, you're not talking about France. They're not the same thing. So I am so Parisian. Kind of a cliche of Parisians is that they don't care about people or places outside of, you know, the périphérique, basically the outside of Paris, that they don't care about it. I'm more Parisian than the Parisians, because not only do I not care about them, I don't know anything about them. I don't even know that they exist, because I spend all my time in Paris. I'm learning, you know, I love France, and it's a beautiful place. I love all the different parts of the country. But I can really only talk about Paris, I think. So the things I will say will be focused on Paris. Going back to your question, French people always wear berets and striped shirts.
Did you know that we have a 45-minute long audiobook that also comes with an ebook to read along with, teaching you 10 of the most useful idioms that you can use to sound like a native level speaker? You know, the next time that you want to impress someone, be it for a job interview or an English exam like the IELTS test, then you can whip out one of these phrases and really wow them. We've selected these 10 because they're daily idioms. They're ones that you can use in many, many situations. So you won't be wasting your time learning a random idiom that you'll never really get the chance to use. And the even better news is that we're giving this audiobook and ebook away for free. And all you need to do is find it in the show notes of this episode. Head over to thebritishenglishpodcast.com and find it in the homepage. Or, just like the free worksheet for this episode, go to thebritishenglishpodcast.com/freebies. That is FREEBIES.
I'm actually wearing a striped shirt today for this recording. People can't see it because it's not video, but I am wearing it today. So the thing about the berets, no. I almost never see French people wearing berets, but the only people I see wearing berets in Paris are tourists, and it's a very common sight. You'll see couples walking around, and it's for some reason, it's always the girl. She's wearing a beret, and you think, oh, right, you're a tourist. Probably an American tourist, because there are like little tourist shops selling souvenirs and berets, and so the girl's like, I'm going to wear a beret, and then they walk around Paris in their beret, and they just look like tourists. I know one person who wears a beret, but he's got his own, it's not a normal thing. But the striped t-shirts, yeah, quite common.
Okay.
Because and that's good, because I think they look good. I think those striped marinière t-shirts look cool, and so they are quite a common sight here, especially as you get towards the coast. So if you go to places like Marseille or, I don't know, somewhere like La Rochelle or Brittany as well, Normandy, you know, places near the coast, then you see them because they're associated with the coast, with the seaside.
Yeah, nautical kind of fashion.
Yeah.
Right? Sailing.
Yeah, it's cool. I think they look great, the stripy t-shirts.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great. So no beret, but they do sometimes wear a striped shirt.
Yeah.
Again, focusing mainly on your experience in Paris.
Yes.
But yeah. Okay. Nice. We've got loads of questions, so we're going to go quickly through this first little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The French all have poodles.
Poodles, those dogs that we see sort of in American movies and stuff if they're set in Paris. No, I can't remember the last time I saw a poodle in Paris. But having said that, small dogs are definitely a thing here. So there are lots of small dogs, but not poodles. Poodles are actually quite large, really.
Yes.
They can be quite large dogs. Miniature poodle, is that a thing? Toy poodle.
Yeah.
Or miniature poodle, yeah. Any small dog really is quite common. There are plenty. Pugs, what other ones? Pomeranians.
The French bulldog, I assume?
French bulldog, I suppose so. Bulldogs, certainly. I'm not sure what's the difference between a bulldog and a French bulldog.
Slightly smaller, with pointier ears. I think they're really cute. British bulldog is the chunkier, more aggressive-looking one that sells insurance.
Oh, yeah, French bulldogs. Yeah, definitely. Very common here. Small dogs, yes, but poodles, not really.
Good. Okay, there we go. French people can't or won't speak English.
This is a good one, and this is a very common assumption that the French people are all arrogant and they're like, no, I speak English, but I will not. That they don't. They refuse to speak English. A lot of people do speak English here in Paris, but French comes first, because we're in France. So naturally, French comes first. Rather than being arrogant about English, I find that French people are more shy about English and they're embarrassed about their English a lot more. They are actually a little bit shy about using English. So if you go in and just start speaking English, they might not be that up for it at the beginning. But this is changing, and these days I find that people are quite willing to speak English and more people do. But it depends. It's a strange sort of social interaction that you have. So the way it works is that you have to start in French.
Right.
Okay? If you start in English, then they will just speak French to you. Right? Because, you're in France.
Yeah.
So you have to start in French. You've got to make an effort to speak some French. And then they will basically, in their head, they'll go, oh, I see that your French is terrible. Let's do this in English. But at least you made an effort. It's just polite to make an effort. Also, something vital about life here is that you have to start every interaction by saying bonjour or bonsoir. You have to do that first. It's just basic politeness.
That's actually later on in the question saying, do they always say hello to each other regardless of the scenario? So
yeah, it's like a password that you have to enter before you interact with a French person. If you don't, then it's like, when you try and enter your Google password and it goes, or your Apple password on your computer, and it just goes, c'est pas possible. It's just not possible. So you're likely to rub people up the wrong way. You will come across as rude, without realizing it, and then they might be a bit rude to you. And then you will go away thinking, oh, French people are so rude. But you don't realize that you started it by not using the right codes.
And that's probably why this is on the list, this question, because English people come over and don't use this code and then, receive that treatment and then think, oh, the French are mean. But really, we started it.
Yeah, but also they can be a bit mean.
Okay. I did actually hear, when I was living in Germany, I had a couple of French friends and they didn't really want to spend time together. And it was something to do with, I can't remember if it was about their French or their English, but they felt like they would be judged by one another.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Yeah? Is there something to that?
French people judge each other all the time. It's a pity, really. But yeah, French people are very judgmental of each other, which is fascinating. I still can't quite work out why. But yeah, very much so. And so, my wife is French. And when we go on holiday, if we go somewhere else, like, if we go to the States or something, if she overhears other French people, she'll be like, French people. She can't stand, like, mixing with other French people. I don't know why, really. And whereas if I hear British people, I'm like, oh, Brits, all right, mate. Whereas she's just like, she cannot stand bumping into other French people. She just can't stand it. So
that's interesting.
I don't really know why. But yeah, French people will judge each other. And this is the thing about learning English here, which is one of the reasons why it's difficult for French people to learn English, because they can't win, really. You can't win. So either as a French person, if you're a French person, if you speak good English, right, other people will go, oh, look at him. He thinks he's brilliant with his good English. And if you speak bad English, they'll be like, oh, his English is shit. So you can't win. if you're French and you're learning English. That's why maybe your French friends didn't really want to see each other.
I see.
Because they would lock into this kind of French way of behaving together, and they would feel uncomfortable speaking English in each other's presence because they judge each other. And maybe it comes from school. They're very harsh at school.
And does that,
the teachers are very strict.
Do you think that could tie into feeling shy about using their skills, their English maybe, because they feel like they're being judged?
Absolutely. I mean, I used to teach at university here, so I had classes of like 25, 18-year-olds. Like, it was really tricky to get them to just speak. They would lock into this traditional thing where I spoke and they just sat there listening and taking notes. And if, I'm not used to that as a TEFL teacher, it's all about engaging the room and reducing teacher talking time. But it was just like too much for them. And they judged each other's English more than I judged their English. And I was like assessing them literally as part of their university degree. So it's very hard. It's a pity because it means that they get blocked and they don't get to really own their English. And it's changing, though. It is changing.
Good. Yeah. Okay. All right. The next one is, do French people smoke like chimneys?
Again, I don't know about French, but in Paris, yeah, lots of people smoke. Smoking is like it's a big thing. It's just a lot of cigarettes get smoked.
Yeah.
You see loads of people smoking, sitting on the terrasse, which is like the sort of the space in front of a cafe in the street. Loads of smoking. And apparently cigarette butts are a problem because they get washed down the drain and then they clog up the sewers.
Yeah.
And it's a huge issue. There's just like millions of cigarette butts. Yeah, I think Parisians do smoke a lot.
Wow. Okay. And it's still not changed in the last couple of decades?
I'm sure it's less than it used to be, as generally, fewer and fewer people smoke. But it's surprising how many people smoke here. I'll just like look around and people are just walking down the street. They've got a fag on.
Yeah.
And lots of smoking.
Yeah. Okay. What would you guess about British people nowadays? Do you think it's probably still quite common?
I think we talk about these differences between Britain and France. In many cases, they are little differences, like that speech from Pulp Fiction, that scene where John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson John Travolta's just come back from Europe and he's going, the thing about Europe, it's the little differences. Yeah. So it's little things. So, British people, if you go to London, you probably see a lot of people smoking there too, but it's just a bit less than in Paris. It's just a bit more noticeable here. So Brits probably, you still see quite a lot of smoking, but I think it's less. It's certainly a lot less than it used to be.
Okay. I noticed in America it was like a dirty habit now.
Yes.
It has been for a bit of time. And when I went to Germany, there were adverts, billboards promoting smoking, and I was really shocked by that. I was like, whoa, I feel like I'm in the 80s.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I don't see adverts for cigarettes. So I guess those things have been banned.
Okay.
And all that stuff. You'd never see it advertised. Cigarette packets now are covered in warnings and horrible pictures and stuff like that. So I guess they don't need to promote it here, Charlie, because, everyone's already quite committed to doing it. But obviously it's seen as a big public health issue. It's done less than it used to be, but it's still surprisingly common.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to throw a few in at once here and let you decide where you want to go with this.
Okay.
So French people drink a lot of wine, eat a lot of cheese, and eat a lot of baguettes.
Yeah, definitely.
All true?
Yeah, I don't really need to say that much more. The wine is obvious. It's like a huge thing here. French wine is maybe it's got to be the best wine in the world, and there's a big culture of it. So yeah, of course, people drink tons of wine. The red, white, rosé, champagne, the baguette. Absolutely. Yeah, every day you go to the boulangerie and you buy your bread. It's baguettes, but there are different types of bread as well. But the baguette, yeah, very, very, very common. Yeah. And cheese, same thing. Yeah, it's which is great. And the other things are like charcuterie, meats, like ham, basically, different types of ham, dried ham, smoked ham.
Okay, yeah. I want to just test without saying it to see how you say it to a British person. What's the chocolate pastry that we sometimes get in a bakery?
Oh, pain au chocolat.
Okay. So you have a little bit of an accent on the end, but you don't go full French.
I don't know if I'm in a boulangerie and
But
I'm
talking to
buying
me,
one,
talking to an English person.
talking to an English person, pain au chocolat. I can't. It's difficult for me to change to say pain au chocolat or something. I don't know. What would you say?
I think what do I say? Pain au chocolat. Yeah, I say pain au chocolat.
Chocolat. So pain au chocolat. Chocolat. So yeah, I'm still the chocolat rather than chocolat.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's a slight difference.
Yeah.
But yeah,
okay.
having lived here for 10 years now, that is one of the bits of French that I've well, I wouldn't say I've mastered it. I'm sure that I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but that's one of the things I can now confidently say. Une tradition et un pain au chocolat, s'il vous plaît. I can pretty much do that now, but so I'm not going to give that up now, Charlie.
No, good. Charlie.
Charlie.
And what about the plain one? How do you say that word?
Une croissant.
Okay, and
Croissant.
to a British person?
I don't know, maybe a croissant.
Ah, okay. So you would change it back.
Do you want a croissant? Do you want a croissant? Do you want a croissant? I don't know how I would say it, really. I think I'd probably be pretentious and say, would you like une croissant? Because that's a thing in the UK. If you say words with a proper French accent, then you come across as really pretentious and annoying.
Yeah. I was at a wedding in February in England, and the best man came up to me and he said, Charlie, it's fantastic to see you again. The last time I saw you, we were in Mendoza in Argentina, right? And the best memory I have of you was when we went to that club. But you, proper pretentious then, you were saying you were living in Chile. Chile. And I was just thinking, I did probably say I lived in Chile. Chile. I can't remember how I pronounced it, but still, British people are very sensitive to attempting a different accent, aren't they?
If I said, oh yeah, these days I live in Paris, then everyone's going to think, oh, you pretentious twat. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, that? But especially with French, when you're just talking and suddenly you say a certain word with a French accent, then you're just going to be marked as pretentious.
I think we do associate the French accent and French language as quite cultured, don't we? So it's like trying to go up a level.
I mean, I don't want to do this thing which is called French bashing. So this is actually a thing. I've never heard of German bashing, really, or Spanish bashing, or Italian bashing. French bashing is a thing, and this basically means criticising the French or having a go at the French. I don't really want to do that. But you know what? French people criticise themselves all the time. The point I'm making is that French people can be quite pretentious. Yeah, French people are pretty pretentious.
Okay.
Where not everyone, but you do get certain people who will sort of talk in a way where they're sort of intellectualizing about something without any sense of irony or without any sense of self-deprecation. They will just sort of be giving their opinion. Obviously, Charlie, with your podcast, you are, like whatever it is. I can't think of a good example, but that was an outrageous French impression I did then. There's quite a lot of pretentiousness here. It's true.
To defend them, I suppose, because there is a lot of culture in like high culture or the arts and everything.
Yes.
It's going to be seeming that way for a country that is less involved in the arts, I guess.
A certain kind of intellectualism and a kind of academic intellectualism. Just a lot of talking. There's a hell of a lot of talking that goes on. It's just like, oh, God. Maybe one of the differences between our countries and our cultures is that the UK is quite a pragmatic place. We like to focus on sort of getting things done, right? Whereas in France, it's a sort of romantic culture. I don't know how that makes people just talk. But so take a business meeting, for example. What happens at a business meeting in the UK is that there'll be 10 minutes of small talk about whatever. And then it's like, right, let's crack on. Let's get down to it. Let's get down to business. And then you just focus on the task at hand. And it's all about, trying to get the job done. Whereas in France, like everyone has to have their say. You've got to go round it. Everyone's got to give their opinion. And there's just lots of opinions flying around and nothing gets done. And then you run out of time. And then, it's just like these things drag on and on and on. And it's like a different feeling where you have to let people give their opinions and have their say. And that in some ways is more important than let's just get the thing done.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's interesting to hear.
By the way, I'm no expert on this stuff. I mean, I go around living my life observing Parisians and not understanding what the hell's going on a lot of the time.
So your data collection isn't flawless?
Oh no, I'm lost a lot of the time. I'm just like, what the fuck is going on here? I don't understand what's happening. Why do they, and sometimes it's just a feeling. Like, it's just, I don't know what it is, indescribable thing. But yes, there is certainly something different. And I often feel like a fish out of water, but I don't really know why.
Right, okay. Nice phrase, though.
I'll do my best for you.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you. We're actually going to go on to part 2 in a second, but we're going to end with, hopefully, a positive stereotype. French men are the most romantic people in the world. What do you think?
Oh, I don't know, Charlie, because I don't have that much direct experience in that regard. Obviously, but I would say that probably, again, going back to that pragmatic romantic thing, I think that probably French people are more classically romantic than us. French men are more romantic than Brits, because we are a little sort of rubbish, aren't we, in that regard? And romance doesn't come naturally to us. We're a bit awkward and a bit sort of just crap when it comes to being romantic. And it's something my wife has had to kind of learn to accept. That it's not my strong point. Whereas the French men, obviously they're a lot more romantic, and the rest of it seems to come naturally to them. But then at the same time, I've heard that French men can be pretty. Female friends of mine have noted that just walking down the street, you get catcalled like way more than in America or the UK. That it's odd, like people in the street are kind of like will bother women a bit more. So although it's on one hand more romantic, on the other hand, it's also a bit too much sometimes.
Okay, yeah. I heard a Jerry Seinfeld quote about how that's kind of like our last resort, honking the horn. That's the man who's kind of failed on every other attempt, and this is his only resort. He's thinking, if I honk this horn, maybe she'll turn around and get in the car with me.
Yeah, but what I know that routine, that Seinfeld routine, where they're like, what is that? Like honking the horn and they're just driving away.
Yeah.
And the woman's like, wait, I didn't know how you felt. Come back. Yes. Why don't they and just see ya? Like, what's the logic? I don't know.
Yeah, very nice.
But here it's kind of like, mademoiselle, prendre un café avec moi. Mademoiselle.
But that shows confidence.
You mentioned before about the danger of stereotyping and saying that all people do this. Obviously, France is a very diverse place, and there are many different types of people. So it's not like all French men will catcall women in the street. Certainly not. I guess it's a certain type of guy who would do that.
Yeah, and that's the 1% perhaps that you occasionally see, and that's what you're reporting on from your 10 years of experience, perhaps.
Yeah.
Last one, before we go on to part 2. Gourmet meals. Do the French always need to have a gourmet meal, or are they satisfied with a staple?
It's a bit of both, really. So there's certainly the culture of the, gastronomic food is certainly a thing here. And again, we go to the pretentiousness of the gastronomic restaurant, where it's like a few tiny little blobs of something on a plate and then some spots and stripes, and it's just like, okay. But then, so there's a lot of restaurants like that. But then there are loads of places where you can get just really good rustic food. Maybe French people appreciate the staple rustic French food a bit more than the gastronomic food, but it's a bit of both. And it's all pretty good quality as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, French people will just like a platter of cheese and ham or whatever it is. There are certain sort of rustic meals which are very common. So yeah, it's kind of both. But they certainly value food a lot, and that's a very important part of their culture, whether it's the gastronomic stuff or the more sort of rural and rustic stuff.
Okay, nice. And do you feel like you've become more of a foodie since you lived in France, in Paris?
Perhaps I have. I think the culture is that when you eat the food, you talk about it and you comment on it and you critique it. I do that with my wife when we eat.
Okay.
And maybe I've become a little, my standards have become a bit higher.
Okay.
probably.
So the French have helped you out in terms of creating a more diverse palate or more mature palate, perhaps?
Yeah, but you say that, but then French people in some way have got a very narrow palate.
Oh.
Where it's like anything, like they will love their French food, and then when you step outside of that, it's like, woo, I'm in a new, dangerous new world. And they can be quite conservative about their eating habits. For example, you cannot get a decent curry in this country. It's just impossible.
And that's interesting considering you're so close. Like, it's just a channel.
It's just like a 2-hour Eurostar train.
Yeah.
But curry has no dominion here. It's spicy food, but it's not just the spiciness. It's like the different range of curries. So here in France, curry is just one thing. And it's like this weird yellow sauce.
Oh.
But, you get curry houses and stuff, but they've been sort of neutered, right? When I go to an Indian restaurant here, and I'll say I'll have the, whatever it is, chicken jalfrezi. Or jalfrezi is a bad example because it's already quite spicy. But if I say I'll have whatever it is, it's a chicken curry standard. And I'll say, can you make it quite hot, please? And they'll be like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. And they still don't. Because in their experience, the vast majority of their customers cannot handle even a hint of spice.
Right.
It's like, il pique. Like, it's too hot. Yeah, so they can't take spicy food at all.
So let's see. No berets, in your opinion, but some striped shirts, especially towards the coast. No big poodles necessarily, or not many, but more French poodles and smaller dogs.
Yeah.
Hesitant to speak French, but for many reasons,
English.
Quite deep. Speak English.
Yeah.
That would be a mute world. Smoke quite a lot still.
In Paris, yeah.
Yeah. Eat a lot of baguettes, drink wine, eat cheese, and what was the other one? The most romantic people in the world, the Frenchmen, potentially, but there's a downside to it as well.
Don't forget the Italians. The Italians are the only people who are more French than the French.
Oh, okay.
You know that character Pepe Le Pew? Do you remember him?
It rings a bell.
It's Warner Brothers cartoons, I think. So, the Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's one character who is a skunk, right, with a white stripe down his back, and he's chasing after a cat. This cat is walking through a building site and some paint lands on its back, a stripe of paint down its back. So the skunk thinks this is a female skunk, and he's French and he's following her everywhere and constantly trying to, chat her up, right? And being very, very French. I mean, we see Pepe Le Pew as like the epitome of the romantic French man who is constantly trying to woo this woman and bothering her, essentially harassing her, really. Everywhere in the world, that skunk is French, but in France, he's Italian.
Okay, that's a really good measure. So they see the Italians as more romantic.
Even more French than the French. So almost like everything you can say about a lot of the stereotypes about the French are also true of other countries, like the Italians, for example. I don't know. It's all a bit of a mystery, but interesting.
There we go. Well, we're going to go on to the French values compass in part 3, which is talking about their most associated value, which would be interesting to hear whether you think that is true based on a book by Dr. Mandeep Rai. Thank you very much for listening to part 1, guys. If that's all you were wanting to listen to, then we will see you next week. But of course, head over to Luke's podcast if you haven't already, on Luke's English Podcast. You can Google it or click on the link in the app that you're listening to this show on. But yeah, thank you very much, Luke.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Charlie. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Wonderful. I'll see you in part 2.
We will leave it there for part 1 of today's episode. Thank you very much for listening up to this point. If you did want to listen to part 2 and part 3 of this conversation, then you can head over to thebritishenglishpodcast.com and check out the Premium Podcast or Academy memberships. The Premium Podcast gives you access to the full conversation along with extended glossaries, transcripts, and flashcards, whereas the Academy gives you all of that plus exclusive videos and audios for the season-based episodes, explaining the vocabulary, exampling them, giving you quizzes, writing assignments, and weekly speaking classes on Zoom. But if you were just here for part 1 of this conversation, then I thank you very much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the show. Do grab that free worksheet by clicking the link in the show notes. My name's Charlie, and I will see you next week on the British English Podcast.